I'm Carol Mitchell, 34, standing awkwardly by the refreshment table at my sister Becky's baby shower. 5 years since I left Willow Creek for Chicago, and my family still only sees my unmarried status, not my marketing career success. Mom flashes that disappointed smile while arranging pink balloons. Becky approaches with that mocking grin I know too well. If they only knew what I've been hiding. The doorbell will ring soon, changing everything. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe to see more family drama unfolds that will leave you speechless. Growing up in Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, meant everyone knew everyone's business. Our town had one main street, 3 churches, and endless expectations. In the Mitchell family hierarchy, my position was always clear. Second best. My sister Becky was the golden child from the moment she was born, with her perfect blonde curls and sweet temperament. I was the ambitious one, the one with unrealistic expectations, as my mother Eleanor would say with a tight smile at community gatherings. Our childhood home on Maple Avenue became the stage for countless scenes of subtle favoritism. When Becky brought home B's on her report card, Mom would make her favorite chocolate chip cookies. When I brought home straight A's, I'd get a distracted, "That's nice, dear," while Mom focused on planning Becky's dance recital costume. Dad was different. With his kind eyes and patient demeanor, would sneak into my room after dinner with a small gift, a bookmark, a notebook, once even a second-hand camera when I expressed interest in photography. "Don't let anyone dim your light, Carol," he'd whisper. Dad's sudden heart attack 7 years ago removed my only ally in the family. I still remember Mom and Becky huddled together at the funeral while I stood slightly apart, feeling like an intruder in my own family's grief. That was the beginning of the real fracture. When I announced my plan to move to Chicago for a marketing position at Anderson & Burke, Mom's response was predictable. "But what about settling down here? Mark Edwards has always had his eye on you." Mark Edwards, who had never left Willow Creek and worked at his father's insurance agency, was apparently my best prospect, according to Eleanor Mitchell. "I have a master's degree in marketing, Mom. This is an amazing opportunity," I had explained, trying to keep my voice level. "Degrees don't keep you warm at night," she had replied, while looking fondly at Becky, who had just announced her engagement to James, her high school sweetheart. The day I left for Chicago, Becky hugged me awkwardly and whispered, "I don't understand why you'd want to leave, but good luck, I guess." It wasn't malicious. That was Becky. She genuinely couldn't comprehend a life path different from her own. 5 years passed with minimal contact, Christmas cards, obligatory monthly phone calls that grew increasingly shorter, and the occasional text message. I built my life in Chicago piece by piece. My apartment overlooking Lake Michigan became my sanctuary. My career flourished as I moved up at Anderson & Burke, eventually leading their digital marketing division. But there was so much more to my life that my family knew nothing about. Then came the email from Becky 3 months ago, subject line, "Baby on the way." The message was brief, gushing with excitement about her pregnancy, James's promotion, and the nursery they were planning. The last line stung. "It would mean so much if you could come home for the baby shower. Mom says it's been too long, and we need to see your face before you become an aunt." An aunt. The word hit me harder than expected. Standing in my Chicago kitchen, staring at that email, I made a decision that would change everything. The baby shower venue was exactly what I expected. The Willow Creek Community Center's main hall, decorated in various shades of pink. Aunt Patricia, Mom's older sister, greeted me with a warm hug when I arrived. "Look at you, city girl. You're glowing," she exclaimed, examining me at arm's length. I always liked Aunt Patricia. She had traveled before settling down, had opinions that sometimes scandalized the conservative town, and seemed to genuinely appreciate my ambition. She was the only family member who had visited me in Chicago, though she never mentioned these trips to Mom or Becky. Cousin Rachel was there too, with her 3 children running circles around her legs. "Carol, I can't believe you're actually here," she said, genuine surprise in her voice as she attempted to corral her youngest. "These monsters keep me so busy I barely leave the house. You're lucky you're free to come and go as you please." The word "free" hung in the air like an accusation. Freedom versus family. the eternal dichotomy according to Willow Creek. Becky's best friend, Megan, was directing the present table with military precision. She'd never liked me, always believing I thought myself too good for her hometown. "Oh, Carol, didn't expect you'd make it," she said with a plastic smile. "You can put your gift there with the others. Becky's going to be opening them after lunch." I placed my carefully wrapped package among the others. Inside was a handcrafted silver baby bracelet from an artisan I'd discovered in Chicago, with space to engrave the baby's name and birth date. I'd spent weeks choosing it, wanting to show I cared despite the distance. As more guests arrived, I retreated to a corner. Watching Mom fuss over Becky, who was resplendent in a pale pink maternity dress, her baby bump prominently displayed. She was beautiful, glowing with that special radiance of expectant mothers. For a moment, seeing them together, I felt a familiar pang. Not jealousy exactly, but a deep-seated sadness about what had always been missing between my mother and me. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and prepared to face the afternoon of subtle jabs and probing questions about my personal life. What I wasn't prepared for was how much worse it would be than I'd imagined. "Carol, you actually made it!" Becky's voice carried across the room as she waddled toward me, hands resting on her baby bump. The gathered women turned to look at me, curiosity and judgment mixing in their expressions. These were women who had known me since childhood, who had watched me leave and speculated about why I hadn't returned. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, leaning in to hug my sister awkwardly around her pregnant belly. She smelled like the same strawberry shampoo she'd used since high school. "Let me look at you," she said, stepping back. Still as thin as ever, some things never change. Must be nice not having to worry about pregnancy weight. Her comment was delivered with a smile, but the implication was clear. "You look beautiful, Becky. Pregnancy suits you," I said sincerely. Mrs. Peterson, my former English teacher, approached with a glass of punch. "Carol Mitchell, what a surprise to see you. We were just talking about how Becky is carrying on the family tradition, starting her family right here in Willow Creek. You're still in Chicago then? Not married yet?" Before I could answer, Becky jumped in. "Oh, Carol's married to her job, aren't you, sis? No time for dating when you're climbing the corporate ladder." She laughed, linking her arm through mine as if we were sharing an inside joke. "My career is going well, yes," I said carefully, "but I'm not all work." "She sends the most interesting Christmas cards," Mom added, joining our circle. Just Carol standing in front of different Chicago landmarks. No boyfriend, no family pictures like normal people send. A faint heat crept up my neck. "I thought you'd like seeing the city, Mom." "Well, it would be nice to see you settling down one of these days." "You're what now, 34? Mom patted my arm. "Not getting any younger, dear." Megan clapped her hands, saving me from responding. "Ladies, time for baby shower games. Everyone to the center table, please." The first game involved guessing the circumference of Becky's pregnant belly using yarn. When my turn came, I significantly underestimated, causing raucous laughter. "Carol has no idea about pregnancy bodies," Becky giggled. "That's what happens when you're the last single woman in the room." I forced a smile, ignoring the fact that at least 3 other women present were unmarried. Somehow, my singleness was considered worthy of special attention. The next game was worse, a version of Who Knows Mommy Best with questions about Becky. When I got most answers wrong, Becky sighed dramatically. I guess that's what happens when you only call once a month and visit every 5 years. No one mentioned that phone calls work both ways, or that I'd invited Becky to Chicago multiple times, only to be told it was too far or too expensive, despite my offers to pay. I excused myself to use the restroom, pulling out my phone once safely behind the locked door. I sent a quick text. "They're worse than I expected. You sure about this?" The response came immediately. "On our way, ETA 30 minutes. Love you." I took a deep breath, splashed water on my face, and returned to the party. The gift opening ceremony was about to begin, with Becky seated in a decorated chair like a queen on her throne. "Before we start," Becky announced, "I just want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate this special time with us, especially my sister Carol, who managed to tear herself away from her important Chicago life to be with family for once." She gave an exaggerated wink as several guests chuckled. I maintained my smile, though it felt increasingly brittle. Becky opened gift after gift, onesies, baby blankets, toys, and practical items that were received with appropriate oohs and ahs. When she reached my silver bracelet, she barely looked at it before passing it to Mom. "Very nice," Mom said flatly, placing it aside without showing it around like she had with a handmade quilt from Mrs. Wilson or the baby monitor from Aunt Patricia. "It's sterling silver," I explained. "From an artisan in Chicago. You can have the baby's name and birth date engraved once she arrives." "How fancy," Becky said with a tight smile. "I hope she doesn't lose it at daycare." After the gifts, while refreshments were being served, Becky cornered me by the dessert table. She was holding a plate with 3 cupcakes. "So, seriously," she said, lowering her voice, "not even dating anyone? At your age?" "My age," I repeated, trying to keep my tone light. "You make 34 sound ancient." "Well, it's not young in the baby department," she said, patting her belly. "TikTok and all that. I'm just concerned for you, sis. Don't you want what I have? A husband? A family on the way? Roots?" Before I could answer, Mom joined us, beaming at Becky. "Look at my beautiful daughter, glowing with her first baby." "I'm her daughter too," I thought, but didn't say. "Still single, sweetheart?" Becky asked with that condescending smile, loud enough now that nearby conversations paused. "No special someone hiding in that big city?" Mom laughed, placing her hand on Becky's shoulder. "Becky's having her first baby. You should be taking notes, Carol. This could be someday if you prioritize the right things." I stayed quiet, the familiar weight of disappointment settling on my shoulders. Then I heard the doorbell ring, and despite everything, I smiled. The community center door opened as Megan was about to announce another game. Every head turned toward the entrance, curious about the late arrival. My heart raced as Thomas stepped in, holding 4-year-old Lily in his arms. They were a vision, Thomas in his navy blazer that brought out the blue in his eyes, and Lily in her favorite yellow dress, her dark curls framing her face. For a moment, the room seemed frozen in confusion. This wasn't someone they recognized, certainly not an invited guest. Thomas's eyes found mine immediately, and his reassuring smile gave me the courage I needed. "Sorry we're late," he said, his deep voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Traffic from the airport was worse than expected. He approached me with confidence, Lily squirming to get down from his arms. "Who's this?" Mom asked, her voice tight with confusion. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Becky, everyone, this is Thomas, my husband." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Becky's mouth literally fell open, her hand instinctively going to her pregnant belly, as if to protect her baby from the shock. "You're what?" Mom finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I could answer, Thomas extended his hand to her. "Thomas Matthews, I'm Carol's husband. We've been married for 5 years now. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Mitchell." Mom didn't take his hand, her eyes darting between us in disbelief. "Mommy," Lily called, breaking free from Thomas's arms and running straight to me. I knelt down and caught her in a tight hug, breathing in her familiar scent of baby shampoo and the slight sweetness that was uniquely Lily. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overflow. "Did you have a good flight?" "Daddy let me have 2 cookies," she announced proudly. The collective gasp that went through the room might have been comical under different circumstances. I stood up with Lily on my hip, facing my family and the gathered guests. "And this is our daughter Lily. She just turned 4 last month." "4," Mom repeated, weakly, her face paling. "You've had a child for 4 years and never told us?" Becky had sunk into the nearest chair, one hand still on her belly, the other covering her mouth. James had moved to stand behind her, his hands on her shoulders in a protective gesture. "I think Aunt Patricia said," breaking the tense silence, "we should give Carol a moment to explain." She was the only one who didn't look shocked, I noticed. Her slight smile told me she'd suspected something all along. "Explain?" Mom's voice had found its strength again, tinged with anger. "Explain how my own daughter has been married for 5 years with a child and never bothered to tell her family. How do you explain that?" Thomas placed his hand gently on the small of my back, a gesture of support I'd come to rely on over the years. "We understand this is a shock," he said calmly, "but there's more you should know." All eyes turned to him, including mine. We hadn't planned to share the other news today, but looking at Thomas's determined expression, I knew he was right. It was time for complete honesty. Carol and I are expecting our second child, he said, his pride evident in his voice. Due in about 4 months. I unzipped my loose-fitting jacket, revealing the baby bump I'd carefully concealed since arriving. It wasn't as pronounced as Becky's, but it was unmistakable. The room erupted in chaos. Becky burst into tears, while Mom sank into a chair, looking as though she might faint. The other guests began whispering frantically among themselves, and Megan looked like she'd just witnessed a car crash, horrified, but unable to look away. "You're pregnant!" Becky cried, her voice rising. "You came to MY baby shower pregnant and didn't say anything. How could you be so selfish?" "Selfish?" I repeated, the word hitting me like a slap. "I've kept my life private because every time I've tried to share anything important with this family, it's been dismissed or diminished." "That's not true," Mom protested. "Isn't it?" I countered. Years of hurt making my voice tremble slightly. "When I got accepted to Northwestern with a scholarship, you complained about the expense of moving me there. When I landed my first major account at Anderson & Burke, you changed the subject to Becky's engagement. Every accomplishment, every milestone in my life has been treated as less important than whatever was happening with Becky. So you punished us by hiding your marriage and our grandchild." Mom's voice cracked with emotion. "How could you be so cruel?" Lily, sensing the tension, clung tighter to me. "Mommy, why is that lady crying?" she whispered loudly, pointing at Becky. "It's complicated, sweetie," I said, kissing her forehead. "Remember how we talked about meeting new family today? That's your Aunt Becky and Grandma Eleanor." "The ones in the pictures?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Yes, baby, the ones in the pictures." Despite everything, I'd made sure Lily knew who her grandmother and aunt were. Our home in Chicago had family photos displayed prominently, even if the relationship was strained. I wanted Lily to know her roots. Thomas stepped forward. "We didn't come here to cause upset or steal anyone's spotlight," he said diplomatically. "We came because Carol and I agreed it was time to bridge this gap. For Lily, for our new baby, and for all of us." Aunt Patricia approached us, her arms outstretched toward Lily. "Well, I, for one, am thrilled to meet this beautiful little girl. I'm your great Aunt Patricia, sweetheart. Would you like a cupcake?" Lily looked at me for permission, and when I nodded, she cautiously went with Patricia, though she kept looking back at me. The ice broken, a few other guests awkwardly approached to introduce themselves to Thomas. James, after ensuring Becky was okay, came over and shook Thomas's hand. "This is quite a surprise," he said, his expression unreadable, "but congratulations on the new baby." The party had effectively derailed, with the focus entirely shifted from Becky's impending motherhood to my revealed family. I could see the hurt and betrayal on my sister's face, and despite everything, I felt a pang of regret for how this had unfolded. This wasn't how I'd wanted it to happen, but years of dismissal and judgment had left me few options. "I think," Mom said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "that Carol and I need to have a private conversation. Now." Mom led me to the small office at the back of the community center, her back rigid with tension. Thomas gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before I followed her, leaving him to manage Lily and the awkward social situation. Once inside, Mom closed the door and turned to face me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "How could you?" she demanded. Her voice barely controlled. "How could you keep my granddaughter from me for 4 years? What kind of daughter does that?" "The kind who grew tired of always being treated as less than," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I tried to tell you about Thomas when we first got serious. Remember that Thanksgiving 5 years ago? I mentioned I was dating someone special, and you spent the entire dinner talking about Becky and James's house hunting." "That's not," Mom began, then stopped, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "You barely said anything about him. How was I supposed to know it was serious?" "I tried again when we got engaged. I called you specifically to share the news, and you interrupted me to talk about Becky's promotion at the elementary school." Mom's brow furrowed, clearly trying to recall the conversation. "You never actually said you were engaged." "Because you didn't let me get the words out." My composure was slipping, and after a lifetime of having my news overshadowed by Becky's, I just stopped trying when we decided to get married. It was spontaneous, a small ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden with just a few friends. By then, it seemed easier to just live our lives without the constant comparison and disappointment. And when Lily was born, "What's your excuse for that?" Mom's voice broke on the question. The guilt I'd carried for years surfaced again. "I did try, Mom. I sent you an email with her birth announcement and photos. You replied with 2 sentences. 'She's cute. Becky and James are thinking of starting a family soon.'" Mom looked genuinely confused. "I don't remember that." "Of course you don't," I sighed, pulling out my phone. I navigated to my saved emails and handed it to her. "I've kept it all these years. Read it." She took the phone reluctantly, her eyes scanning the screen. I watched as her expression shifted from defiance to confusion to the beginning of understanding. I don't know what to say. It's been like this my entire life, Mom. Every achievement, every milestone, measured against Becky's and found wanting somehow. When Lily was born, something in me just broke. I couldn't bear for her to feel what I felt, like she was somehow less important, less valuable. So you punished me by keeping her a secret. Mom's voice was softer now, but still hurt. It wasn't about punishment, it was about protection, for Lily and for myself. I placed a hand on my baby bump, feeling a flutter of movement. "Do you know what Thomas said to me after you met him the one time I brought him home for Christmas 6 years ago?" He said, "Now I understand why you never feel good enough." One dinner, Mom. That's all it took for him to see what I've lived with my entire life. Mom sank into a chair, looking suddenly older than her 62 years. "I never meant to make you feel that way," she whispered. "I know you didn't do it intentionally, but intention doesn't change impact." I remained standing, years of suppressed emotions making it impossible to relax. "Do you remember when I won that national marketing competition in college? The one with the scholarship prize?" Mom nodded slowly. "I called home so excited, and you said, 'That's nice, dear, but I need to go. Becky's having trouble picking her wedding colors.' My national achievement versus Becky's color swatches. That's been the story of my life." A knock at the door interrupted us. Aunt Patricia poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Becky's quite upset and asking for her mother." Her eyes met mine sympathetically. Mom stood, torn between 2 daughters in crisis. "I should go to her." "Of course you should," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Becky needs you, just like always." "Carol, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Even now, even after learning you have a granddaughter you never knew, and another grandchild on the way, your first instinct is to go to Becky. She's pregnant and upset. So am I." The words burst out louder than I intended. "I'm pregnant too, Mom. I'm your daughter too. But I've never been enough, have I?" Aunt Patricia stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her. "Eleanor, I love you, but Carol is right. You've always favored Becky, and everyone has seen it." Mom looked shocked at her sister's betrayal. "That's not true. I love both my daughters equally." "Love isn't just a feeling, Mom," I said quietly. "It's actions, it's attention, it's making someone feel valued." "I've always been proud of you," Mom insisted. "Being proud isn't the same as showing interest or support. When was the last time you asked me about my work, my life, my dreams? Without immediately changing the subject to Becky?" Mom opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She couldn't remember, and that fact alone spoke volumes. I think Aunt Patricia said gently that there's been hurt on all sides here. "Eleanor, you need to recognize your role in creating this distance. And Carol, keeping Lily a secret was a choice that caused pain, regardless of your reasons." I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. I never wanted it to be this way. I wanted Lily to know her grandmother, her aunt. But every time I considered reaching out, I remembered all the times I'd been dismissed, and I couldn't bear for her to experience that. "She's beautiful," Mom said softly. "She looks like you did at that age." "She has Thomas's eyes," I replied, the simple exchange feeling like the first genuine moment we'd shared in years. "And your spirit," Thomas added, appearing in the doorway with Lily. "Sorry to interrupt, but someone was asking for her mom." Lily ran to me, and I lifted her into my arms despite my pregnancy. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" She nodded. "The crying lady wants to talk to you," she whispered loudly. "The crying lady is your Aunt Becky," I explained gently. "And yes, we should talk to her." I looked at Mom. "Together? As a family?" Mom hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, as a family." As we prepared to return to the main room, Thomas held me back for a moment. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his concern evident. "Getting there," I replied honestly. "It's all coming out now. No more secrets." He kissed my forehead. "I'm right beside you, always." With Lily on my hip and Thomas's hand in mine, I walked back into the room where my sister waited, ready for the next phase of our confrontation. When we returned to the main room, most of the guests had awkwardly departed, leaving only close family and Becky's best friend, Megan, who was hovering protectively near my sister. Becky sat in the decorated chair that had been used for gift opening, her makeup smeared from crying, with James standing behind her, his hands on her shoulders. The room fell silent as we entered. Lily, sensing the tension, clung tighter to me. I sat her down gently, whispering that she could go with Aunt Patricia to see the cupcakes again. Patricia, understanding the need for adult conversation, took Lily's hand and led her to the refreshment table. "I think we need to clear the air," I said, breaking the silence. Becky looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Clear the air? You show up at my baby shower, my special day, and drop this bomb about having a secret family. How do you expect to clear that air?" "Becky, I understand you're hurt." "Hurt," she interrupted, her voice rising. "You've been lying to us for years. I had it all planned, but then Becky called with news about her promotion, and the whole conversation was about that. I tried again when Lily was born, sending that email with photos, but the response was so minimal that it hurt. After that, the longer I went without telling you, the harder it became to find the right moment." "So, why now?" Becky asked, her anger seemingly replaced by genuine confusion. "Why come to my baby shower and reveal all this?" Thomas and I exchanged a look. "Because of the babies," he said. "Our daughter." He nodded toward Lily, who was happily eating a cupcake with Aunt Patricia and our son. He placed a hand on my belly. "And your daughter," he added, looking at Becky's pregnant belly. "They're cousins. Family. We didn't want them growing up as strangers because of adult conflicts." "It's a boy?" Mom asked, her eyes going to my baby bump. I nodded, a small smile forming despite the tension. "We found out last month. Lily's thrilled about having a baby brother." A tear slipped down Mom's cheek. "A grandson. And a granddaughter," Thomas added gently. "Who's been asking about her grandma after seeing her pictures?" "You have pictures of me? Of us?" Becky asked, surprise evident in her voice. "Of course we do," I confirmed. "Our home is full of family photos. Lily knows who you are, who Mom is. We've told her stories. She knows she has family in Pennsylvania, even if she's never met you in person until today." This revelation seemed to affect both Mom and Becky deeply. The idea that they had been present in Lily's life, even from a distance, appeared to soften something in their expressions. "I should have tried harder," I acknowledged. "But so should you, both of you. Relationships go both ways." A silence fell over the room as everyone absorbed this truth. It was James who broke it. "Well, this isn't how any of us expected this day to go, but maybe it's what needed to happen." He looked between Becky and me. "You're sisters. You're both about to be mothers. Isn't it time to start fresh?" Becky looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "I never realized you felt so overlooked," she said quietly. "In my mind, you were always the successful one, the smart one who got out of Willow Creek and made something of herself. I was actually jealous of you." "Jealous? Of me?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "You had everything I wanted growing up. Mom's attention, Dad's approval, a clear path you were happy with. And you had freedom, opportunities, adventures. Do you know how boring it feels to be the good daughter sometimes? To never disappoint, but also never surprise?" We stared at each other, decades of misunderstanding hanging between us. Then, unexpectedly, Becky laughed. A short, almost hysterical sound. "What's funny?" I asked cautiously. "Us," she said, wiping away a tear, both thinking the other had it better. What a waste of It was absurd when you thought about it. "I want to know my niece," Becky said suddenly, "and my nephew when he arrives. I want Lily to know her cousin. Can we start there?" It was a small olive branch, but a significant one. "I'd like that," I replied honestly. Mom had been watching our exchange silently. Now she spoke up, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've made mistakes," she admitted, "with both of you in different ways. I never meant to make you feel less important, Carol. And Becky, I never meant to put so much pressure on you to be perfect. We all contributed to this situation," Thomas said diplomatically. "But the good news is we're all here now. It's not too late to build something better." Lily chose that moment to run back to us, her face smeared with chocolate frosting. "Mommy, can I show Grandma my doll? I brought Rosie on the plane." The simple question, so innocent and hopeful, broke the remaining tension. Mom's face softened completely at being called Grandma for the first time. "I'd love to see your doll, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. As Lily excitedly retrieved her favorite doll from Thomas's bag, I caught my sister's eye. There was still hurt there, still confusion, but also a glimmer of something new. Perhaps understanding, perhaps hope. "Your daughter is beautiful," Becky said softly. "She has your smile." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a beginning. The community center had grown quiet as evening approached. Most of the pink decorations had been taken down, the gift table cleared, the food packed away by helpful hands. Only our immediate family remained: Mom, Becky and James, Thomas and me, Aunt Patricia and Lily, who was now comfortably settled on my mother's lap, showing her the intricacies of Rosie the doll's wardrobe. "She has 3 dresses and 2 pairs of shoes," Lily explained seriously. "The blue one is for parties." "It's very pretty," Mom replied, handling the tiny fabric with care. I watched them from across the room, a complicated mix of emotions swirling within me. There was something profoundly moving about seeing my daughter with my mother, even after everything that had happened. "Are you okay?" Thomas asked quietly, coming to stand beside me with 2 cups of tea. "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. "Relieved, I think. Exhausted, maybe, a little hopeful. It's been quite a day," he agreed, his eyes tracking Lily's animated conversation with her newly discovered grandmother. "But I think it was the right choice to come to bring Lily." I nodded, leaning against his solid presence. "Thank you for supporting me through this. I know it wasn't easy." "Hey, for better or worse, remember?" He kissed the top of my head. "Besides, Lily deserves to know her family, all of them." Across the room, Becky had been watching us. After a moment's hesitation, she approached, her hand resting protectively on her baby bump. "Can we talk?" she asked, gesturing toward the small kitchenette area. "Just us sisters?" I nodded, squeezing Thomas's hand before following Becky. In the kitchenette, she leaned against the counter, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about how I always made conversations about me. I never realized I was doing that." "Most people don't," I said gently. "It's not like you were being malicious." "Still," she twisted her wedding ring nervously, "I feel terrible thinking about all the times you tried to tell me important things and I just steamrolled over you. I could have been more persistent," I acknowledged. "I could have said, 'Hey, Becky, shut up and listen for a minute. I'm getting married.'" This drew a small smile from her. "The truth is, we both played a part in this breakdown. James said something to me while you were talking with Mom. He said that sometimes, when people grow up with a particular dynamic, they just keep repeating it without questioning, even as adults. Like we were still playing the roles assigned to us as kids." "The golden child and the afterthought," I said, then regretted my bluntness when I saw her wince. "Sorry, that was harsh but honest," she countered, "and maybe we needed some honesty." She took a deep breath. "For what it's worth, I never saw you as an afterthought. You were the brave one, the one who escaped. I admired that, and I envied how easily everything seemed to come to you," I confessed. "Mom's approval, Dad's affection, knowing exactly what you wanted." "Nothing came easily," Becky said, surprising me. "I just worked really hard to make it look that way. Do you know how terrified I am about becoming a mother? I've been having nightmares for months." "Really? But you've always been so good with kids. You're literally an elementary school teacher." "Teaching them is one thing. Being responsible for one 24/7 is completely different." She looked down at her belly. "I'm scared I'll mess up, that I won't know what to do." "Join the club," I said with a small laugh. I cried every day for the first 2 weeks after Lily was born. Thomas had to Google, "Is it normal for new mothers to sob while changing diapers?" Becky laughed, a genuine sound that reminded me of our rare good moments growing up. "Is it normal?" "Apparently very. Hormones plus sleep deprivation plus the sudden reality that you're responsible for keeping a tiny human alive. It's a lot." "But you figured it out," she said, looking through the doorway at Lily, who was now showing James her doll. "She's amazing, Carol. You're doing a great job with her." "Thanks," I said, genuinely touched by the compliment. "And you will too, with your daughter. Plus, you'll have James. He seems like he'll be a great dad." "He will be." Becky smiled fondly at her husband. "He's already read like 5 parenting books. Thomas went through a phase where he recorded himself reading bedtime stories so Lily could listen to them when he was traveling for work," I shared. "He had this whole production set up with different voices for each character." "That's adorable," Becky said, her expression softening. "He seems like a good man." "The best," I agreed. "I got lucky. I'd like to get to know him," she said cautiously. "And Lily, of course, if that's okay." "I'd like that too," I said sincerely. "And I want to be a real aunt to your daughter. Not just a Christmas card and birthday gift aunt, but someone she actually knows and trusts." "I'd like that," Becky echoed, her eyes welling with tears that she quickly blinked away. "Stupid pregnancy hormones." "Tell me about it," I laughed, gesturing to my own eyes, which had grown misty. "It doesn't get better the second time around." A comfortable silence fell between us, different from the tense quiet of earlier. After a moment, Becky asked, "Can I?" She gestured tentatively toward my baby bump. I nodded, taking her hand and placing it where my son had been kicking energetically earlier. We waited, and after a moment, he obliged with a strong kick. "Oh!" Becky exclaimed, her eyes widening in delight. "That's amazing! Mine mostly does somersaults that make me nauseous. Lily was the same way. I survived on saltines and ginger ale for about 2 months." "Me too," Becky said, sounding genuinely pleased at this shared experience from the main room. "Mom called. 'Girls, Lily wants to show us something on Thomas's phone. Family pictures, he says.'" Becky and I exchanged a look. "Should we go see?" she asked. "I think we should," I agreed. "Fair warning, there are a lot of ridiculous holiday sweater photos. Thomas has a thing for themed family pictures. James is the same way. He made us dress as elves last Christmas for our card." As we rejoined the others, I felt a tentative hope blooming. Things weren't fixed. Years of misunderstanding and hurt couldn't be erased in a single afternoon. But we were talking, really talking, perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. Thomas had connected his phone to the community center's projector system, and Lily was excitedly pointing at the screen, where a photo of our little family at the Chicago Zoo was displayed. "That's me feeding the giraffe," she explained to her rapt audience. "His tongue was purple." "Thomas is quite the photographer," Aunt Patricia commented, admiring the composition of the shot. "It's my hobby," he said modestly. "I've documented pretty much every moment of Lily's life, and our wedding," I added, as he swiped to a beautiful shot of us exchanging vows at the Botanic Garden, surrounded by flowering cherry trees. Mom made a small sound, and when I looked over, I saw tears in her eyes. "You were a beautiful bride," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied, equally softly. Thomas continued the impromptu slideshow. Lily's first steps, her preschool graduation, our family trips, holidays, ordinary moments made special through his lens. With each image, I watched my family seeing the life they had missed, the moments they hadn't known about. "I wish we had been there for these," Mom said finally, voicing what I knew she must be feeling. "You can be there for the ones to come," Thomas replied, his tone leaving no doubt that the invitation was genuine. "We'd like that," James said, his arm around Becky. "Maybe you could visit us after the babies are born?" "Both babies," he clarified, looking between Becky and me. "Or you could come to Chicago," I suggested. "We have plenty of room. Lily would love to show her cousin around once she's old enough." "I want to see the Big Bean," Lily chimed in, referring to Chicago's famous Cloud Gate sculpture. "The bean is pretty cool," James agreed, making Lily beam. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, arrangements were made for the following day. Thomas, Lily, and I would come to Mom's house for lunch. James and Becky would join us. We would talk more, share more, begin the process of truly getting to know each other again. At the door, Mom hesitated before hugging me carefully around my baby bump. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for so many things." "Me too," I replied honestly, "but we're here now. That's what matters." As we drove to our hotel, Lily already dozing in the back seat, Thomas reached over and took my hand. "Proud of you," he said simply. I squeezed his hand in response, watching the familiar yet strange streets of my hometown pass by outside the window. It hadn't been easy, and we had a long way to go, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had a complete family. The one I'd built with Thomas, and the one I'd been born into. Both imperfect, both valuable, both mine. 3 months later. The crisp autumn air of Chicago carried the scent of fallen leaves as I arranged a vase of fresh flowers on our dining table. Our spacious apartment, overlooking Lake Michigan, usually so familiar and comfortable, felt different today, charged with a nervous energy I couldn't quite shake. "They're just family," Thomas reminded me gently, coming up behind me to adjust a place setting. "It's going to be fine." "I know," I said, rubbing my very prominent 8-month baby bump. "It's just strange having them here, in our space." "Good strange or bad strange?" he asked, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. I considered the question. Different strange, I finally decided, but good, I think. The doorbell rang, and Lily raced from her bedroom, where she'd been carefully selecting toys to show her grandmother and aunt. "They're here," she squealed, practically vibrating with excitement. Thomas opened the door to reveal Mom, Becky, and James, all looking slightly uncertain but smiling. Mom held a large gift bag, while Becky balanced a cake container on top of her own rounded belly. Now in her 8th month. "Welcome to Chicago," Thomas greeted them warmly. "Let me take those." Mom stepped in first, her eyes immediately finding me. "Carol," she said, a wealth of emotion in a single word. "Look at you, you're absolutely glowing." The compliment, so freely and genuinely given, warmed me unexpectedly. "Thanks, Mom. How was your flight?" "Much better than I expected," she admitted, "though these old bones aren't used to traveling much anymore." "Grandma!" Lily exclaimed, unable to contain herself any longer. She launched herself at Mom, who knelt somewhat stiffly, but with obvious pleasure to receive the enthusiastic hug. "There's my sweet girl," Mom said, the endearment falling naturally from her lips, despite having only spent time with Lily on video calls these past 3 months. "I've missed you so much. I drew you pictures, and I have a new dance to show you, and I want to take you to see the Bean tomorrow." Mom laughed, a light sound I hadn't heard in years. "We have all weekend, sweetheart. We'll do everything you want to do." While Lily monopolized Mom's attention, Becky waddled toward me, her pregnancy making her movements cautious. "Hey, sis," she said, gesturing to our matching bellies. "Look at us, the Mitchell sisters, and our synchronized pregnancies." I laughed, giving her a careful hug around our protruding stomachs. "How are you feeling?" "Like a whale," she answered honestly. "But the doctor says everything's perfect. 2 more weeks until my due date." "And 4 until mine," I reminded her. "Though Thomas is convinced this little guy is going to arrive early, he's running out of room in there." Thomas called from the kitchen, where he was helping James with the bags. He's going to evict himself soon. After settling our guests, Thomas led them on a tour of our apartment while I put the finishing touches on lunch. I could hear Lily's excited commentary as she showed off her room, her toys, her view of the lake. It was surreal hearing those familiar voices in our home, the space that had been exclusively ours for so long. "Your place is beautiful," Mom said when they returned to the dining area. "So bright and open." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely pleased by her approval. Thomas gets most of the credit for the design. He has the artistic eye. "She's being modest," Thomas countered, coming to stand beside me. "Carol is the one who found this place and saw its potential when it was a complete disaster." "Just like your father," Mom said softly. "He always could see what something could become, not just what it was." The mention of Dad, so casual and affectionate, caught me off guard. Mom rarely spoke of him since his death. "I never thought of it that way," I admitted. She squealed, practically vibrating with excitement. Thomas opened the door to reveal Mom, Becky, and James, all looking slightly uncertain but smiling. Mom held a large gift bag, while Becky balanced a cake container on top of her own rounded belly. Now in her 8th month. "Welcome to Chicago," Thomas greeted them warmly. "Let me take those." Mom stepped in first, her eyes immediately finding me. "Carol," she said, a wealth of emotion in a single word. "Look at you. You're absolutely glowing." The compliment, so freely and genuinely given, warmed me unexpectedly. "Thanks, Mom. How was your flight?" "Much better than I expected," she admitted, "though these old bones aren't used to traveling much anymore." "Grandma!" Lily exclaimed, unable to contain herself any longer. She launched herself at Mom, who knelt somewhat stiffly, but with obvious pleasure, to receive the enthusiastic hug. "There's my sweet girl," Mom said, the endearment falling naturally from her lips, despite having only spent time with Lily on video calls these past 3 months. "I've missed you so much, I drew you pictures. And I have a new dance to show you, and I want to take you to see the Bean tomorrow." Mom laughed, a light sound I hadn't heard in years. "We have all weekend, sweetheart. We'll do everything you want to do." While Lily monopolized Mom's attention, Becky waddled toward me, her pregnancy making her movements cautious. "Hey, sis," she said, gesturing to our matching bellies. "Look at us, the Mitchell sisters and our synchronized pregnancies." I laughed, giving her a careful hug around our protruding stomachs. "How are you feeling?" "Like a whale," she answered honestly. "But the doctor says everything's perfect. 2 more weeks until my due date." "And 4 until mine," I reminded her, though Thomas is convinced this little guy is going to arrive early. He's running out of room in there. Thomas called from the kitchen where he was helping James with the bags. He's going to evict himself soon. After settling our guests, Thomas led them on a tour of our apartment while I put the finishing touches on lunch. I could hear Lily's excited commentary as she showed off her room, her toys, her view of the lake. It was surreal hearing those familiar voices in our home, the space that had been exclusively ours for so long. "Your place is beautiful," Mom said when they returned to the dining area. "So bright and open." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely pleased by her approval. Thomas gets most of the credit for the design. He has the artistic eye. "She's being modest," Thomas countered, coming to stand beside me. "Carol is the one who found this place and saw its potential when it was a complete disaster. Just like your father," Mom said softly. "He always could see what something could become, not just what it was." The mention of Dad, so casual and affectionate, caught me off guard. Mom rarely spoke of him since his death, but I guess you're right. As we settled around the table for lunch, the conversation flowed more easily than I had expected. Lily entertained everyone with stories about her preschool adventures, while James and Thomas discovered a shared passion for craft beer that launched them into an animated discussion about Chicago's best breweries. "So, tell me about your business," Mom said during a lull. "Thomas mentioned you run a marketing agency together." I blinked in surprise, not used to her showing interest in my career. "Yes, Matthews and Mitchell. We started it 3 years ago after both leaving corporate positions. Thomas handles the creative and design side, and I manage the strategy and client relationships. That sounds like a perfect partnership, she observed. It is, I agreed, smiling at Thomas. We complement each other well. Are you still working this close to your due date? Becky asked, curiosity rather than judgment in her tone. Mostly from home now, I explained. We have a great team that handles the day-to-day operations. I'll take a few months off when the baby comes, but our business partner Angela will step up during that time. I'm impressed, Becky said, and it sounded genuine. I'm already on maternity leave. I just couldn't handle 25 first graders anymore with this belly. Different jobs, different demands, I said with a shrug. That's what's great about having choices. We can each find what works for our situations. Mom nodded thoughtfully. I think I'm just now beginning to understand that, she admitted, that there's no one right way to be a woman, a mother, a person. Her words hung in the air, unexpectedly profound. It was perhaps the most insightful thing I'd ever heard her say. After lunch, while Thomas showed James his home office setup, Becky, Mom, and I settled in the living room with cups of tea. Lily had gone to her room for her afternoon quiet time, a routine she strictly adhered to even with visitors. I brought some photos, Mom said, pulling an album from her bag. I thought Lily might like to see what her mom looked like at her age. She'd love that, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. As Mom opened the album, memories flooded back. Becky and me in matching Easter dresses, building a snowman in the front yard, sitting on Dad's lap while he read to us. I'd forgotten about these, I murmured, tracing a photo of us at the county fair. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months, Mom said, turning pages slowly, looking back at these old pictures, remembering how things were. I realized something I'm not very proud of. Becky and I exchanged a glance, but remained silent, giving her space to continue. When your father died, Mom went on, her voice steady but soft, I was lost. Robert was my compass in so many ways. He balanced me. Without him, I clung to what felt safe, familiar. Becky stayed close, followed a path I understood. But you, Carol, she looked up at me, you were so much like him, independent, ambitious, seeing possibilities I couldn't see, and that scared me. Scared you? Why? I asked. Because every time I looked at you forging your own path, taking risks, building something new, it reminded me of him, of what I'd lost, and it was easier to focus on Becky, whose choices I could understand, than to face that grief every time I saw you. The revelation stunned me into silence. All these years, I'd thought she favored Becky because she valued her traditional choices more, because she was disappointed in my different path. I'd never considered that my very resemblance to Dad might be the thing that pushed her away. I'm not saying it was right, Mom continued. It wasn't. It was unfair to you, and I'm truly sorry for that. But I want you to know it was never because I loved you less or valued your choices less. It was my own weakness, my own inability to cope with grief. Tears pricked my eyes, and I reached for her hand. Thank you for telling me that, I said softly. It helps to understand. I wish Dad could have met Thomas and Lily, Becky said, her own eyes misty, and our babies. He would have adored them, Mom assured us, and he would have been so proud of both of you, building your lives, your families, in your own ways. The moment was interrupted by the patter of little feet as Lily emerged from her room, rubbing her eyes sleepily. I heard talking about Grandpa, she said, climbing onto the couch between Mom and me. We were just looking at some old pictures, I explained, showing her a photo of me at age 4, standing proudly next to a sandcastle at the beach. That's you? Lily asked incredulously. You were little like me? The simple question made us all laugh, breaking the emotional tension. Yes, sweetheart, even mommies were little once, I assured her. And Grandma too? Even Grandma, Mom confirmed with a smile. A very long time ago. As the afternoon wore on, Thomas and James rejoined us, and we fell into comfortable conversation. Plans were made for the weekend. A visit to the Bean as promised, the Shed Aquarium for Lily, a restaurant Thomas and I had been saving for a special occasion. Later, after our guests had gone to their hotel for the night, and Lily was tucked into bed, Thomas and I stood at our living room window, looking out at the Chicago skyline illuminated against the night sky. "That went better than I expected," I admitted, leaning against him. "Your mom is really trying," he observed. "I can see how much this means to her." "I think it means a lot to all of us," I said. "Having Lily changed my perspective on family. I want her to know her roots, even if they're complicated." "Speaking of complicated," Thomas said, his hand resting on my belly where our son was performing his nightly acrobatics, "have you thought more about Mom's offer to come stay with us after the baby is born?" I had been surprised when Mom had tentatively suggested it earlier that day, offering to come for a few weeks after my due date to help with Lily and the new baby while we adjusted. My initial instinct had been hesitation, worried about old patterns re-emerging. But seeing her today with Lily, with Becky, with me, it felt different. "I think I want to say yes," I decided. "It won't be perfect. We'll probably still have moments of friction, but I think it would be good for all of us." Thomas kissed the top of my head. "Family is never perfect," he said, "but it's worth the effort." The next morning, we met at the iconic Cloudgate sculpture, the Bean, as Lily insisted on calling it. Watching my daughter holding both my mother's and my sister's hands as they examined their distorted reflections in the polished surface, I felt a profound sense of healing. "Mommy, look!" Lily called. "I can see all of us at once in the Bean." I moved closer, Thomas's arm around my waist, and looked up at our reflected family. Not perfect, still learning, but together in the same frame at last. 2 weeks later, I received a middle-of-the-night call from James. Becky had gone into labor. By morning, my niece Emma Grace had entered the world. Mom was already on a plane to Pennsylvania to meet her newest grandchild. "She's beautiful," Becky told me over video chat, her face tired but radiant as she held her tiny daughter. "I can't wait for her to meet her cousin." "Just a few more weeks," I promised, feeling the tightening in my own belly that had begun that morning. As it turned out, it was only 3 days later that our son, Robert Thomas Matthews, made his entrance into the world, named for the grandfather he would never meet, but whose legacy lived on. Standing in our hospital room, holding our newborn son while Lily gently touched his tiny fingers under Thomas's watchful eye, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, the pain of feeling overlooked, the walls I had built, the secrets I had kept, and the courage it had taken to finally break through it all. The truth was, family relationships required honesty, even when it was difficult. They required vulnerability, even when it felt safer to keep walls up. And they required forgiveness, not just of others, but of ourselves for the parts we played in the breakdown. My phone buzzed with a text from Becky. "How are my nephew and sister doing? Mom's getting on a plane tomorrow. She says she can't believe she has 2 grandchildren born in the same week." I smiled, typing back with one hand while cradling Robert with the other. "We're all doing great. Can't wait for you to meet him when you're recovered enough to travel. Your niece and nephew should grow up knowing each other." As I sent the message, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. Old habits and hurts wouldn't disappear overnight, but we had taken the first, most important steps toward healing. We had chosen to be honest, to be present, to be family, in all its messy, imperfect glory. Life isn't about having a perfect family or being a perfect person. It's about finding the courage to be authentic, to stand in your truth even when it's uncomfortable, and to offer others the grace to do the same. That's the lesson I hope to pass on to both my children. That true connection comes, not from presenting a flawless facade, but from being brave enough to show your whole self, flaws and all. Have you ever had to reveal a difficult truth to your family? How did you find the courage to be honest when it was easier to keep secrets? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And if you know someone struggling with family relationships, consider sharing this video. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our challenges is the first step toward healing. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, it's never too late to build a stronger, more authentic connection with the people you love.